Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello, welcome back to Right on Track. I am so excited because joining me today is Rachel Sellick from Scarlet Management. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Demi.
How are you?
I am very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm very, very excited. You're going to be talking all about artist management with me today. Before we dive into that, can you share a little bit with the listeners about how you got into the industry and what made you want to become a manager?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a pretty weird story, really. I mean, I grew up um, in South Wales, and when I went to uni, I did all things science. So I did a science degree, I did a science master's degree. I'm currently doing a science PhD. And so I never really, as much as music was a part of my life growing up, with my dad being very into music, I did music a little bit too. It was always there, but it was never kind of a part of my career path, so to speak. But I always went to country festivals here in the UK. I mean, we have a lot more now. Back 6-7 years ago, we only ever had one or two. And I got really fascinated by just the country music industry in general. And met a few people just on the off chance, really, who were starting to create country music in the UK. And I was doing my master's at the time and just said, well, I'm really good at writing emails and being very organized and logical. So if you need any help on that side of things, then let me know. And in my spare time, I can give you some help. So I did that, and it kind of spiraled from there, really. After the release of their first single, that band ended up going to the States and performing in California. They came back, and I'd organized them a UK tour, so they did that, and they were just doing really well and getting multiple award nominations in the UK country scene. So I thought, oh, this is quite fun. Like, I feel like I can actually offer something here. More than just to friends, if that makes sense. So at the end of 2019, I kind of thought, I want to make it a little bit more professional. So I'll come up with maybe a company. And I was doing a lot of artist managerial type roles with these artists. So that's kind of why I was heading in that direction. So I set up the company Scarlet River, end of 2019, as I say. And then from there, I mean, then it kind of hit lockdown. And so obviously things kind of changed a little bit, and I was fascinated by the fact that things don't just go in one direction. There are so many things that you have to do to change with the times, to make sure that the artists are getting the exposure they deserve, even though they can't tour. And so that's where the PR aspect of the company came from. I had a lot more time on my hands and realized that over the last few years of being a part of the UK country scene, I'd managed to network and connect with a lot of people in the industry, and thought that I could offer that to new up and coming artists, both in the UK and abroad, at a way more affordable price than these big PR companies had. And so I've been doing that over the past year too, and building that. And we work with, artists here in the UK, we've worked with some European artists, and now we work with a lot of artists in Nashville too. And just keep doing it. I do it because it's fun. I enjoy it. And it's something that is always changing, and there's always a new direction to be learned and new artists to discover.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. I think it's really cool how you went from, developing your management company at the end of 2019, right before COVID. And I think the industry as a whole, we really had to adapt. I know for me, my first single came out right before COVID. So I had to really get started in the industry in a very different way than other artists who released prior to that. But I think your whole mindset of being able to adapt and change the way the industry is changing and keeping things coming up for the artists you're working with. It's like a great perspective, and you're like fantastic at it.
Thank you so much. But yeah, you're right. It is one of those things where, recording, I'm sure, when you released your first single, you could at least do a few shows to promote it and go out and meet people. And then suddenly everything has to be done online. So that kind of PR aspect of it kind of became a little bit more important, so to speak, because you have to think about all the different ways that you can stand out from a crowd when everyone's trying to do the same thing. Everyone was on social media, weren't they, doing live streams and this, that, and the other, which was great because you were able to reach a new audience from from across the pond, which it wouldn't ordinarily be so easy. But at the same time, you had to be different because everybody was doing it. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah, no, it definitely has been. And I just have a question for you, real quick, before we dive into the specifics. I love the name Scarlet River Management. How did you come up with that?
um, Unfortunately, it's not a very fancy story, but I've always loved the name Scarlet. I always thought it was quite fierce, but it represented the fact that the company was run by a female. So I guess that's kind of where the Scarlet bit came from. And I was doing some research, and kind of Scarlet management kind of exists in other industries. So I was like, oh, maybe that doesn't quite sound right. And somebody said to me, oh, it needs to be Scarlet something management. And I was like, okay, cool, tuning, that's fine. And I was learning to drive at the time while I was thinking about this company name. And the guy, because where I live in Chepstow in South Wales, it's by two rivers. So he was like, oh, you should call it Two Rivers Management because you're by the Wye River and the Severn River. And I was like, I don't really like two rivers, but I do like Scarlet River. And that's legit.
I love it. That's such a cool story. I mean, you might not think it's fancy, but it definitely has a story behind it, and everything has a story behind its name. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't plucked out of thin air. That's for sure.
Huh. So, for your management company, Scarlet River, you offer various services. So, can you briefly mention what these services are you offer for Scarlet River, and then we'll touch on them more specifically?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, artist management was the main focus setting up the company. So obviously, that's kind of working alongside the artist in pretty much everything that they do. Helping to expand their vision, really. Whether that includes release strategy or merchandise or touring, all of that. The PR is a lot of a release strategy for when artists have new singles or new EPs or albums that they want to release. We kind of help with reaching media outlets and expanding that reach. So that can incorporate media outlets for reviews and interviews and features. That can incorporate radio play. That incorporates then Spotify playlisting afterwards. So just a kind of everything that's incorporated in a release. We then partnered with a company called Dark Duck Agency, who are based in Sweden, and they're a Scandinavian booking agency. So we partnered with them, and the whole idea and the vision for that is that we can help artists that they work with tour in the UK, and artists we work with in the UK to tour in Scandinavia. So that's hopefully the plan. And then the social media side of things really just runs alongside the PR, to be honest. Giving guidance for artists on maybe some of the social media content that they can use or create to go alongside the release strategy, so everything kind of aligns with what they're doing.
Fabulous. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about artist management specifically because I know that's the main focus for you. So, what do you think you really look for in artists that you want to manage?
Sure. For me, there's a couple of things. They have to obviously we work a lot with artists who do country music, so they have to kind of be within that realm. We're not too fussy, like we don't have that kind of strict cutoff point of that's not country and that is. I love modern country and today's US country. I really enjoy that sort of stuff. So it's not really about that. It's about there's got to be some level of talent there, and there's got to be a level of professionalism, quality to the work they're producing. And we have to be invested in it, because if we don't believe in the music, then we aren't going to be able to work with it. And that doesn't mean that the music isn't good. That's a really important thing to say. It doesn't mean the music isn't good. It just means that one particular manager just might not be right for that particular artist. From the artist point of view, I think also it's really important that that artist is motivated in what they want to do. An artist manager doesn't come on board to do all the work for an artist. The manager comes on board to provide an extra pair of hands so that theoretically, on a day-to-day basis, you can cover twice as much work. And funnily enough, I was watching the Olympics this morning on the telly, and they were talking about, there's a great British guy called Adam Peaty, and he's the world record holder for, I think it's the 100 meters breaststroke or something. Um, and they were talking to his coach, and they were talking about, him and what makes him unique. And he said that, it's not necessarily the most talented of people that make it. It's the people who are the most motivated and work the hardest and have that winning mindset. And that's what they were saying about Adam Peaty, that necessarily growing up, he wasn't like the best swimmer, but he just has that positive mental attitude and mindset to go and win. And I just loved that. And that's kind of stuck with me today. And I think that's really important in even the music industry too.
I absolutely love that. Yeah, I love that so much. And I think what you said about, it's not only the most talented people that make it all the time, it's the people who work their butts off day in and day out. And it's having people that believe in them. Like, if you're going to take on an artist to manage, you really have to believe in that artist. And that artist needs to care enough about what they're doing in order to have somebody believe in them. So I totally 100% agree with the whole perspective of being professional and putting in a hard work ethic.
Yeah, 100%. Because you can be the most talented artist in the world, but you can't expect things to just be handed to you on a plate. Unfortunately, in today's age, that just isn't a thing. That doesn't work. So it's definitely about finding somebody that you connect with and have a good relationship with, and you can, yeah, do great things together.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned relationship just now. So I wanted to ask you, what do you look for in the manager to artist relationship, and what is kind of expected from both sides?
Sure. I think the most important things are obviously loyalty, honesty, and respect. I think that goes hand in hand for any industry or any good relationship, really. You expect, from the artist perspective, you expect the manager to be loyal to what you're doing and to promote you and work hard to make the best out of the situation, be honest about what's going on, be respectful of the artist's decisions, and, not go and do things that the artist doesn't believe in, for example. But at the same time, the manager expects that the artist will work hard, will come to them and talk about what's going on and keep them in the loop with stuff, and do what they say they're going to do as well. And if that's always the case, and, you know, it's, you've got to have a good relationship with them in terms of even just being on a friendship level too. It is a working relationship, but if you can have those conversations potentially that are outside of the music industry, on a deeper level, I think that helps you to kind of create the foundations for working together and achieving something.
I love that. And I think that's really important because music is a very personal thing, especially when you're working with artists who write their own music. It's very personal. And I think also, like, putting your trust in somebody, like a manager from the artist point of view, it has to be somebody that they trust and that they love working with. And I really do think that creating that stronger friendship and relationship beyond simply the business side is really important moving forward, because as somebody progresses in their career, they want the people on their team to be friends and people who truly believe in them. And if it's simply a distant business relationship, then that support and, true belief doesn't really show up as much.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why one manager might not work for somebody and it might work for somebody else. Never settle for just any old thing. Always go for the best and what you believe in.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a question about when an artist should get a manager. For some artists, they can be good with a manager, and others maybe not so much. So, what do you think is the right point for an artist to make the decision about getting a manager?
Yeah, that's a really good question and quite difficult to answer in some respects, because I mean, there are so many artists out there that don't need a manager, and they, seem to be able to do it all themselves, and they have that, they're organized and motivated, and they have that support network around them already, that they can go ahead and do it on their own, and that's totally fine. Like, I think it's about you thinking as an individual artist, what it's really important to identify your strengths and your weaknesses. What am I good at, and what can I do on my own and don't necessarily need help with, but actually would what do I struggle with, or what am I not so good at, that bringing somebody on board would be beneficial for my career. And for some people that is bookings, because they may not be very good at contacting venues and organizing tours. For some people, that might be the PR, because they're not so good at the whole release strategy business side of things. For some people, that's social media because they hate social media. I mean, I wouldn't blame you if you did. It's just about that kind of thing. In terms of when are you ready, if you're somebody that feels like you would really benefit from a manager, I always think that you need to have already created some momentum and structure for your music. Really have a vision for where you want to be, have a vision for what you want to achieve, understand your sound, because it's very hard for a manager to come on board if the artist doesn't know what their sound is, because if you don't know what your sound is, then you can go in all sorts of directions. So I think just being assuring yourself as an artist, already having created some momentum, and then when you get to a point where you think, I've now got so much going on that it's really difficult to do this all by myself, and I've got stuff to show for that, then I think an artist manager would be interested.
Awesome. That's a lot of great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you mentioned having a very clear vision of, your sound and what you want to do moving forward. And so I know something that you do as an artist manager is kind of assist artists on developing their vision even further. And so when you have a new artist or one that you're working with, and I'm assuming that everything's totally individualized based on the artist, what is the strategy and the conversations that you have with the artist to really nail down what their vision is?
That's a great question. I think always being, that conversation has to start honestly and openly. Um, and just discovering, what has the artist already done, and what do they like about what they do? What are their influences? Where do they see themselves? I think those are really questions that the artist needs to really think about and be honest about with themselves. Because for some people, it's just about, some people it's a deeper kind of, I want to share my experiences in lyrical form or song form about what I've been through, and I want other people to hear that and relate to it and help people on that side of things. For some people it is, I just want to be big and I want to tour and I want to sign a record label and all this sort of stuff. So I think it's about just nailing that down, and it doesn't matter what the answer is. You just have to know that that is the right answer for you as an artist. And I think as you grow and learn about how best you communicate with each other, I think that's what defines how the conversation goes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fabulous. No, it definitely does make sense. And I think that goes back to what you said before, like having a vision and knowing what exactly you want to do before you actually bring somebody on board. Because if you don't know what you want to do, then the artist manager isn't necessarily going to know because it's your career as the artist. So I think it definitely is really important to have a clear vision before necessarily having a manager.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because you're absolutely right. As an artist, you kind of are the business. Like, you're the leader of the business, you own the business, and then you kind of bring people on board to make your business better, for kind of, in a way. So yeah, if you know where you want to go, then you can bring on the right people that will definitely help to enhance that.
Fabulous. So let's touch on the more business side of things with the PR. So press releases are huge when you send them out to get, media coverage and airplay. So can you talk a little bit about what makes a strong press release?
Yeah, sure. So this is really difficult to explain, but when I do a press release, I always think about, what would the company that I'm sending it to want to know? Because that's the really important thing. You might think that something is obvious, but if nobody's never heard of you, then what is going to grab their attention? And so I always suggest artists, or when I'm writing press releases, I would always have like a short bio at the top, something that just talks about potentially, what is the artist's sound, or what have they already achieved, those buzzwords, like if you've won an award or your last single did really, really well, or something like that, things that will pull the reader in, but also introduce the reader to the artist if they haven't already heard of them. And then and then delve into the song, like the meaning behind the song, why the song was written, what is the song sound, those sorts of things, because people are interested in, when you're promoting a song, people want to know more about it, not just listen to it. And obviously there is a level of interpretation when it comes to lyrical content, especially if you write in metaphors, which I know some artists do. But just, yeah, being open about that. But definitely, add all your social media links, add a link to the song, because they can't review the song if there's no link in there, so hyperlink it in. How can they contact you if they want to know more information, or set up a review or a feature or an interview, like any of those things? So just think about those kinds of things, I would say, when setting up a press release. And you can always link in your EPK, the electronic press kit that has way more information if they want to listen to that. But don't bore them with, when I was 6 I picked up a guitar and stuff like that, because they will have to go through hundreds of EPKs a day, especially if they're a big company. So they need to get to the point, they need to be interested. So pull them in with the good stuff.
That's a lot of great advice. Honestly, when I started, like I said before, when we talked, I don't have a manager, so I pretty much had to do all this myself. And I didn't know what a press release was. I didn't know what an EPK was. It took me like forever to like figure all this stuff out. But for like
Oh
my
yeah.
last two, yeah, it was like hard. But for my last two, I definitely did the whole like to the point press release and then link to my EPK if somebody wanted to look at it. And that definitely got me places. So lots of great advice.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is a learning curve, definitely, that this industry. I'm learning all the time. But I'm gonna, if it's okay, I just want to name drop Whiskey Kisses Promotions, who are a great company here in the UK, but they work with independent artists who need some help with this sort of stuff. So you can check out their website. I think it's just whiskeyKissespromotions.com or .co.uk. But just Google them, and they have mentors that you can have one-on-one chats with about specific things. So they have mentors for lots of different areas of the music industry. So if you need any help with that sort of stuff, I would definitely recommend checking them out.
Yeah, like totally awesome. And I think like you definitely, like an artist definitely needs to have a strong press release because when I tried to get interviews and reviews without sending one, I didn't get any responses. And the second I started doing it the way the industry expects it, that's when I started to get things. So yeah, no, it's definitely really important. I agree. So, when you're looking for media outlets and radio and all of those things to send the press release to, what is your process of scoping out the right people or companies to send it to?
Sure. I mean, with things like, if you've got a country song, or let's go more general. So you identify your sound, whether that is pop, country, folk, R&B, whatever it may be, then more than likely a lot of radio stations will have like an hour that is dedicated to that kind of music. So here in the UK, like for example, we have SW20 Radio, which is a local one here down in South Wales, and they have SW20 Country, which is a country show that's every Tuesday. So if that's the case, this kind of almost, I probably then wouldn't go to the head of the radio station to try and get the song played. You would find out who the person is on the country part of the show and then go to them directly. And I think that's the best way to kind of look at, make sure that your music is getting to the right people, or getting to the people that are most likely to be interested. Because obviously, if the head of the radio station is heavily influenced by one genre, then they might not be too interested in what you have to send them if it's completely opposite. So I do think that's quite a good way to start building your database of radio.
That's awesome. And by the way, I love SW20 Country. Carl is the best. Love him.
He is great. He is great.
Yeah, and no, I completely agree. It's all about kind of making personal connections and knowing who exactly to send it to because there are some people I know who kind of just blindly email people without actually doing research ahead of time. So, yeah, I completely agree. Like, do your research and send it to the right people.
Yeah, and ultimately that just saves you time, because it means that your time has been effective in finding people that are going to play your music, rather than spending loads of time on stuff that just won't come to fruition.
Yeah. So the other side of this, as you mentioned earlier, was social media. And so for the social media side of things, when you're trying to build an artist's presence online through their social media and helping them stand out from the crowd, what are your strategies of doing this?
Again, I think this is artist specific. So identifying what, what's the personality of the artist? Is the artist quirky? Is the artist very straight? Is the artist, very comedic? If working out kind of what the artist's personality is like, so you can bring that through in social media, I think is really important, because it's all well and good. It's very obviously, it is very important to share your music, but it's also very important to be personal, and be relatable, because you are a human at the end of the day. Just because you do a specific type of job, it doesn't mean that you're not a human, which I think some people forget, and they don't show themselves for who they are on social media. Obviously, I think part of that might just be down to the fact that social media these days, people always look so perfect. And so everyone kind of wants to be like them. And I totally get that. But I think you've got to remember who you are, and remember that if you can relate to people on a personal level and just share your lives with them, I think they are a bit more likely to follow your journey, because they feel that they connect with it and they can be involved and be a part of it. So that's, for me, is one thing that's quite important. Other things, more businessy style tips would definitely to kind of, if you have a color scheme, stick to the color scheme, stick to your brand, identify what your brand looks like, and always be on brand. So, if you use the colors orange and blue all the time, then try and keep that, that way. If you always use black and yellow, then use black and yellow. Just little things like that. Because, there's a great artist I was working with recently called Amelia Quinn, and when she was releasing her last single, Games, everything was black background, had like an outline of a snake, and all of the color font was in yellow. So every time, say, you were scrolling through Instagram, if you saw something, you didn't even have to pay attention to who was posting it. If it was that color scheme, you kind of made the association that it was Amelia posting it, which I think is really important and something that's so simple yet so effective on social media. So just little things like that, I think, can really go a long way.
I really appreciate you sharing all that great advice. And I think it's like the things that truly get overlooked. Like, I know like some artists who just post, listen to my new song on Spotify, and, like little things like that. But I think your whole point about the fact that we're all human and just show that side and, be real and authentic is like the most important thing, because as artists, we want to connect with our audiences, and the way to do that is being honest and real online and having genuine, conversations with people and just posting real things instead of having to look picture perfect all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And when you do that, people really do tap into what you're doing, because, like you say, you aren't picture perfect all the time. Let's be real. Like, if you are, then you must be perfect. But nobody in this world is perfect. Nobody in the world is perfect. So that can't be the case. So just be open and honest about it. And if you're doing something cool and funky, then share it. That's what Instagram stories and stuff is for, right? Just to share what's going on. And I think probably TikTok is the one that utilizes that the most these days. But just, yeah, find what works for you.
Ah, fabulous. The time went off at a perfect time because I am down to my last couple of questions, which are more personal to you as a manager in your journey so far. So the first one is, what is your favorite part about being an artist manager?
Oh, I think for me, it's about working alongside somebody and being able to impact their musical journey. I think that is great. And when you succeed in that, it's the best feeling. Like, for me, when I'm, whether it's artist management or PR, when you see an artist succeed and you know that you've just helped even just a tiny bit towards that success and they're happy, then that's great.
Fabulous. So, on the other hand, what is the most difficult thing about being an artist manager?
Oh, well, there's a few things. I, working with people in different working with people in different time zones means that sometimes it's really difficult to be in contact at the right time, which can be really difficult. Um, Not impossible, obviously, but yeah, that can be difficult sometimes. And then, to be honest, sometimes there's that overwhelming feeling that you really need to achieve the right thing and do the right thing for them. So when you don't, sometimes that can be disheartening and that can be difficult to deal with.
Oh, yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, thank you for your honesty there, because that's totally a thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, even for the artist, right? I mean, I think we all probably all experience it at some point in our lives, whatever we're doing. But I hate it when, if I'm doing something and I fail at it or I don't do as well as I would like to, I've only let myself down in a way. Do you know what I mean? But if you then feel like that overlays onto somebody else, then I think that's a tiny bit worse of a feeling, anyways.
Yeah. um, so what is the biggest lesson you learned so far?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned. And because you won't always be the best at what you're doing. You won't always be the best, and that doesn't mean you can't become it. It doesn't mean you can't progress. I mean, that's the great thing about life, is that we have opportunities to always grow and always learn. But if there's somebody that's willing to help you, then take it. That doesn't make you a failure. That doesn't mean you haven't achieved the right thing. I think it's just being smart, and being willing to help, when you can.
Fabulous. And last question, what is one big piece of advice that you would like to share to anybody who is interested in being a manager?
Ooh, just dive in and go for it. That's what I did. And
And it worked.
yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I had never intention when I was doing my master's degree in translational medicine. I didn't think I was going to be a manager. Let's be honest. That's just completely two different ends of the spectrum. And somebody, the opportunity popped up, and I just delved into it. So if you want to be an artist manager, then just go for it. If you have a friend that's an artist, just ask if you can help them. Just starting like that. You don't even have to label yourself as anything to start with. Just go for it. Get the experience. Contact companies. If you want advice or whatever. I've had a few people contact me and just say, "Oh, can I do some stuff for you?" 100%. There's always stuff to do. So, yeah, just dive in the deep end. Don't be afraid.
Fabulous, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Of course. Before we go, can you share with everybody where they can learn more about Scarlet River Management and connect with you on social media and your website?
Yeah, sure. So my website is just www.scarletrivermanagement.com. And on there, you'll find everything about what we do, including our services, artist management, bookings, PR. We also have a blog now, which my good friend Jacqueline is writing. So we do artist spotlights. We talk about careers in the industry. So if you're interested in a particular career, you can go find a blog written about that, where we've spoken to people in the industry. We're doing lots of different things like that. So definitely check that out. And then on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, it's just Scarlet River Management. And then Twitter, it's Scar R Management, because of the number of characters or something. It was too long. So that's where you can find me.
Thank you so much again. This has been fantastic. So many incredible gems in this episode about artist management and PR. So, Rachel, I really, truly appreciate you being on for this episode. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And, of course, until next time,
Stay right on track.